Rayan Al-Mansoor had everything: money, fame, and a wife the world envied. But when a DNA test revealed Sophia Malik's unborn child belonged to his own father, Fahad Al-Mansoor, their glittering empire of lies exploded into a nightmare of betrayal, rage, and murder that no amount of wealth could ever silence. The Crime Scene presents a new page of crime, a new mystery, a new shock case. Rayan Al-Mansoor lived a life most could only dream of, wrapped in gold and filtered through luxury. His mansion gleamed under Dubai's sun like a shrine to excess. Imported Italian marble floors, walls laced with crystal lighting, and a garage filled with machines that roared like beasts. On social media, he was the king of perfection, flashing his wealth beside Sophia Malik, his drop-dead gorgeous wife with a social media following big enough to rival celebrities. Their love story was trending hashtags and glossy magazine covers. But behind that curated perfection lay a ticking bomb. Sophia wasn't the same girl he married. The sparkle in her eyes had dulled, replaced with distant stares and forced smiles. Rayan felt it. The energy in the room when she was near, colder than the marble under his feet. She avoided his touch, spent late nights scrolling through her phone, whispering to someone he couldn't identify. When she turned her screen away one too many times, suspicion took root. He told himself he was paranoid, that stress was messing with his head, but the unease grew into obsession. One night, while she slept beside him, he reached for her phone, hands trembling, pulse pounding against his skull. The name that flashed across her messages sent an electric shock through him. FM, a name he knew too well. Fahad Al-Mansoor, his father. Rayan froze, rationalizing, denying, telling himself it had to be a business matter or some family-related conversation. But deep down, something twisted inside him. He started noticing the small things. The way Sophia smiled during family dinners when Fahad cracked his power-hungry jokes. The unspoken tension between them. The glances that lasted too long. His mind was racing with dark thoughts he couldn't escape. And even as he smiled for the cameras, jealousy began gnawing through his soul, quietly lighting the first spark of the nightmare to come. Sophia's pregnancy had everyone in the Al-Mansoor family on edge, but Rayan was the only one drowning in doubt. He couldn't shake the unease, the feeling that something wasn't right about the baby growing inside her. Every time she touched her belly with that gentle smile, it twisted something inside him, filling him with a cocktail of love, fear, and rage. When the doctor recommended a prenatal DNA screening to ensure the baby's health, Sophia agreed without hesitation. But Rayan's mind went somewhere else entirely. He wanted more than medical reassurance. He wanted the truth. Without telling Sophia, he used his father's connections to have the results secretly sent to his private lab. When the envelope arrived, sleek and sterile, his hands shook as he tore it open. What he read didn't just shatter him. It obliterated every piece of the man he thought he was. The baby wasn't his. The test confirmed that the DNA belonged to someone else. But when the identity came up in the secondary report, Rayan nearly collapsed. The biological match was his own father, Fahad Al-Mansoor. For a long moment, he couldn't breathe. The room spun as if reality itself had cracked in half. His first instinct was denial, convinced there had to be a mistake. He paid for another test. Same result. Each confirmation felt like another blade twisting in his chest. The betrayal was beyond human comprehension, his wife carrying his father's child. Every memory replayed in his mind. The glances, the tension, the secret texts. It all made sense now. Rayan's heart curdled into something dark, a storm of humiliation and fury. In that moment, love died inside him. What replaced it wasn't just anger. It was vengeance brewing quietly behind his cold, unblinking stare. Fahad Al-Mansoor was a man who built his empire on dominance and silence, the kind of man whose word was law and whose money could erase any sin. When Rayan confronted him, shaking with fury and disbelief, Fahad didn't flinch. He simply leaned back in his leather chair with that smug calmness that made people obey without question. He didn't deny what had happened, didn't even show shame. He called it a mistake, a moment of weakness, something Rayan should bury to protect the family's name. But to Rayan, it wasn't a mistake. It was the ultimate betrayal. His father, the man he admired, The man who molded him into who he was had taken everything sacred from him and left him hollow. Rayan stared at Fahad and saw not a father, but a monster wrapped in arrogance and wealth. The conversation turned into venom. Fahad warned him not to ruin the family legacy, not to let emotions destroy what generations had built. To calm him, he offered Rayan a new business deal, a $50 million stake in one of the Al-Mansoor projects, a bribe disguised as compensation. But Rayan's silence couldn't be bought anymore. He left that office with fire burning in his chest and an idea forming in his mind that terrified even him. Nights became sleepless. He drank too much, stared at the ceiling replaying every detail of his marriage, every lie, every smile from Sophia that now felt like mockery. His father's words echoed in his head about power and image, but Rayan no longer cared about wealth or legacy. He wanted justice, his kind of justice. The once polished, confident millionaire began slipping into darkness, isolating himself, stalking Sophia's movements, watching his father's every step, and in the shadows of that mansion, a plan began to form, cold, calculated, and irreversible. The night Sophia Malik died, Dubai's skyline glimmered like 1,000 diamonds scattered across the dark, hiding the ugliness festering behind the Al-Mansoor mansion's gold-trimmed walls. The story the world was told sounded clean, a tragic suicide, a broken wife consumed by guilt, but inside that palatial home, blood told a different story. Rayan had played his part perfectly, setting the scene to look like she had ended her own life. The bathtub was filled, the note carefully written, the pills scattered across the marble floor, her wrist slit with precision too neat to be accidental. By morning, social media was flooded with heartbreak emojis and sympathy posts, calling her death a mental health tragedy. But Detective Karim Haddad didn't buy the fairy tale. He was an old-school investigator, one who believed money could hide evidence but not erase the truth. When he arrived at the scene, small details stood out: the lack of defensive wounds, the missing wedding ring, the faint bruises around her neck hidden beneath a silk scarf. Even the blood pattern on the floor whispered something sinister. Rayan stood emotionless, rehearsed, giving statements like he'd practiced them, while Fahad demanded privacy and tried to pull rank, insisting the investigation end quickly. Within hours, the death certificate was signed, the body buried, and the case marked as suicide. But whispers started circulating. Neighbors who heard shouting that night, security footage mysteriously missing 2 hours of data, and Lina Torres, Sophia's best friend, crying publicly that Sophia would never do this to herself. Rayan kept smiling for the cameras, wearing sunglasses to hide his hollow eyes, thinking he had buried the truth with Sophia. But Detective Karim wasn't done, and Lina wasn't backing down. The cracks in Rayan's perfect cover were already beginning to show, and the darkness he thought he'd buried was only just beginning to surface. 2 weeks after Sophia's burial, when the world had already moved on and Rayan's social circle was posting filtered condolences, a small package arrived at Lina Torres's apartment with no return address. Inside was Sophia's old tablet, wrapped in silk and sealed with a note that simply said, "If anything happens to me, find the truth." Lina's hands shook as she powered it on, heart pounding in her chest. The tablet was encrypted, but Sophia had once shared her passcode during a night of wine and secrets, never imagining it would one day unlock her final cry for justice. Inside were voice memos, screenshots, and a hidden folder named Truth. Lina clicked play and heard Sophia's trembling voice narrating what she had discovered in the weeks before her death. She spoke of how Fahad Al-Mansoor had manipulated her, how he drugged her one night after a family event, how the next morning she woke up confused, nauseous, and ashamed. She realized too late that something terrible had happened and that Fahad used money and threats to silence her. Sophia had planned to expose him, but she also mentioned how Rayan's behavior had turned erratic, how his love had curdled into control, and how she feared he might do something drastic. The files contained evidence: text messages, bank transfers, recordings of phone calls. Lina's stomach turned as she realized Sophia had been murdered before she could go public. Without hesitation, Lina took the tablet to Detective Karim Haddad, who had been quietly waiting for something like this. As he scrolled through the evidence, he knew this wasn't just about a domestic tragedy. This was a conspiracy rooted in power, shame, and generational corruption. The beautiful facade of the Al-Mansoor Empire was starting to crack, and the ghosts Sophia left behind were now screaming for justice louder than ever. Detective Kareem Haddad wasted no time once the evidence from Sophia's tablet hit his desk. The files were a digital bomb, blowing holes in the perfect image the Al-Mansoor family had carefully crafted for decades. With a warrant in hand and the media already sniffing around, he led a quiet raid on Rayan's mansion under the cover of dawn. The place reeked of wealth, crystal chandeliers, imported rugs, and art that could pay for an entire neighborhood. But beneath the luxury, the air was heavy with deceit. In Ryan's private office, hidden behind a false panel in the floor, Kareem found a small black safe. Inside were items that screamed guilt: Sophia's diamond necklace stained with a reddish tint, a gun with no serial number, and a blood-streaked wristwatch engraved with Ryan's initials. The evidence lined up too perfectly, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. Forensics later confirmed Sophia's DNA on the jewelry and the watch, while traces of gunpowder matched Ryan's fingerprints. When confronted, Ryan's slick charm cracked. His voice trembled, his arrogance faltered. He claimed it was a setup, that someone was framing him, but even his own staff whispered about strange noises the night Sophia died and the way he burned documents in the backyard the next morning. Meanwhile, Fahad Al-Mansoor moved like a panicked puppet master, calling in favors, bribing officials, even threatening to have Lena silenced. But Dubai's cybercrime unit had already duplicated the files before Fahad could destroy them, making sure every secret his empire tried to bury was now in the government's hands. The empire that once felt untouchable was suddenly under siege. Fahad's fortune couldn't stop the headlines, Ryan's lawyers couldn't rewrite science, and Detective Kareem knew that beneath all their gold, the Al-Mansoors were rotting from the inside out. When the courtroom doors finally opened, the world's eyes turned toward the Al-Mansoor family, once symbols of power and prestige, now stripped bare under fluorescent lights and flashing cameras. Ryan sat in the defendant's chair looking like a ghost of himself, jaw clenched, suit wrinkled, eyes sunken with sleepless guilt. The evidence was airtight: Sophia's DNA, the gun, the bruising pattern, and the files from her tablet linking both Ryan and Fahad to a web of deceit. Fahad, once unshakable, sat in silence beside his attorneys, his empire crumbling piece by piece. During the trial, Lena Torres took the stand, her voice trembling but fierce as she read Sophia's final words to the court. The recordings echoed through the chamber: Sophia's pain, her fear, and her determination to tell the truth even if it cost her life. The jury listened in dead silence, their expressions frozen as layers of the family's corruption unfolded before them. Ryan finally cracked under pressure. In a tearful, half-crazed confession, he admitted to killing Sophia, claiming he lost control after learning the DNA results. He said his father's betrayal pushed him to madness, that he just wanted the pain to stop, that everything inside him died the moment he realized the baby wasn't his. Fahad tried to distance himself, but the evidence of manipulation, coercion, and abuse was undeniable. When the verdict came, the courtroom buzzed with shock and relief. Ryan sentenced to life in prison for premeditated murder, Fahad facing decades for sexual assault, obstruction, and corruption. Outside, reporters swarmed the steps as Detective Kareem watched in silence, knowing justice had finally cracked through money's shield. Lena wept as she left the courtroom, clutching a pendant Sophia once gave her. In the end, the Al-Mansoor dynasty fell not to poverty, but to their own sins, proof that no amount of wealth could bury the truth forever.